But now, fam, let's talk about the post office crisis explained, because it got very, very fugazi. And guys, if you haven't signed up, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't signed up for our rock, then please do ROKFIM, because that's where we're going in case we get demonetized completely and they pull our cord. It can happen any day and any time. So, fam, your favorite Congresswoman, Nancy Pelosi, and the Democrats rushed back into Congress to push a $25 billion bill that went through the House despite Donald Trump telling them that anything coming through on the post office right now is dead on arrival. He will veto it on his desk. And it was even known that Mitch McConnell would not even push it through, and it was not going to get it through the Senate. So either way, they didn't rush this back to get more help for the American people to do rent relief or anything. They went to push a virtue signaling of a bill, of a crisis that they've kind of, I don't want to say created, but reenacted, fam. Because in the HEROES Act, there was money for the post office. However, in the HEROES Act, and this is what led us to have this whole fiasco when it comes to the post office, in the HEROES Act, there was actually legislation about the amending the voting laws within the country. But just before we get to that, I just want to point out right now, I have this USA Today article right here, and I'm not going to go into it because I went through and I watched a lot of the hearing. It was very, very rough. It didn't seem to go anywhere. It looks like they were just doing personal attack after personal attack on Louis DeJoy, who just took the job in July. But anyways, just to retouch, here it is. The fact, the HEROES Act would eliminate state requirement IDs for federal elections. And what I want to do is I want to read, and right there, the second page, what the HEROES Act would change. If enacted, the HEROES Act would overrule those state laws as pertains to federal elections, meaning the president and the Congress. This would have anything to do with the state laws for state legislation. It just mainly affects the fact that they can have less voter verification in the 32 states that have strict voter IDs. Now, you can sit here and argue this all day, fam. I think you might be for less restrictions when it comes to voting. For me right now, I want verification for voting right now because everything is so fugazi that anybody can cheat at any time. And that's not as important to me as getting the other stuff straight. But Section 61004 of the HEROES Act would amend the Help America Vote Act in 2002. A summary of the legislation says if a state has a voter identification requirement to cast a ballot in person or by mail, an individual may take a sworn written statement attesting to their identity to fulfill the identification requirement. The change would not affect the Help America's Vote Act requirements for first-time voters who submitted their voter registration by mail. However, this would open up Pandora's box, fam, for less identification checks in the 32 states that are really strict about it. And it would really potentially flood the gates for the Democrats, who have a lot of friendly mail-in ballot contracts, to fugazi it up and pump up a lot of voters where they can't verify and push them way across the finish line. So thoughts on that?
So let me push back on that. Yeah, I am not for any form of ID. That is the new Jim Crow. That's what the Republicans have always used against minorities, people of color, to make sure that their votes don't count. That happens far more often than the other way around. I'm not saying the Democrats don't cheat, because we do. We know they cheat. We know they cheat. We have been following this election. I think there has to be a way to hold them accountable and to check those ballots, to have somebody oversee where these ballots are going, to have the public oversee where they're being counted, but also not to go the other way where we're literally going back towards the whole you need to have this ID to vote. The vast majority of undocumented people do not go anywhere near that because they're afraid of the police. They're afraid of any sort of interaction with illegalities. In fact, most undocumented people don't have a criminal record at all, because any sort of a stint on their record will get them sent back and deported. So this whole idea that it's just going to allow cheating by it would only be nefariously done by the Democratic Party. But that's why I think instead of punishing the voters, we need to go after the Democratic Party. I am completely, entirely against that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. When it comes to showing up to vote, if you're going to show up to vote, I think the voter laws should be a lot less lax. 100%. If you want to bring a credit card or a couple of forms of ID or something, if it's not even, it doesn't have to be a picture identification. Showing up to vote is totally different than with the mail-in situation going on. Mail-in situations, they want to make sure they can verify these signatures. You know what I'm saying? And that's where the problem comes into hand. So I am a little bit skeptical about allowing just open door policy for when it comes to mail-in ballots. I'd like to see some happy medium. Whatever the case may be, they're trying to change the laws now in a COVID bill, you know what I'm saying? And since they couldn't do that, they then pivoted to go to make this kind of like, and once again, fam, we've known this for going on. How long have the Republicans been going at the post office? Since we know they've been going at the post office, you know what I'm saying? And all these things that were taking place, and it just says Postmaster DeJoy defended his cuts and then some. And I don't want to get into read anything in this article because there's a lot of stuff I want to read, but this kind of goes over the whole process of the hearing, what was said, what went on. A lot of the implications that the Democrats were going after DeJoy for were already in place, and he was just seeing him through. In other words, they had already made plans to get rid of these machines, these counting machines, these sorting machines, which the Democrats are showing pictures of. They're going crazy because the people before DeJoy and then DeJoy agreed that they wanted to open up space for more boxing and whatnot and have more, people working on a little bit more of the mid-range shipping things rather than the actual mail that has slowed down over the course of years when it comes to, except for advertising. For some reason, people are still printing advertising like crazy. We're just throwing them away. But the actual mail is a lot less because of the internet and the way they, mail bills. So what he's doing, he's saying, is he's trying to modernize the post office. And once again, he's going through the things, the cuts where they said they can't go overtime right now and they can't hire management. What he has agreed to, fam, is to freeze all these things that he didn't implement to begin with until the elections are over, because he doesn't want to look like he's on the hook for trying to fugazi an election in which the Democrats are kind of accusing them about.
I mean, I just think like we've seen both methods of cheating by the Republicans and the Democrats. Democrats tend to cheat in primaries. Republicans tend to cheat in the general. I don't put it past either of them. But again, I think we need to attack the crux of the problem and not allow this. To me, it feels like he's hijacking it. Like he's hijacking, just like the Democrats are hijacking the U.S. Postal Service for their political acumen. I feel like Donald Trump is hijacking this attempt to make himself look like he's really for election integrity when he isn't. It's just a way to put out the idea that these Democrats are going to cheat. So both parties are hijacking our election integrity in order for a political manipulation. And I just don't see that it's good on either end. I mean, I think like unless we have open source elections and we can count those ballots in front, none of what these people are doing is going to be good enough.
Yeah, I mean, let's get something straight here. He didn't want them to amend a bill that was around since 2002, and I get that. But at the same time, he's like, "Oh, I'm cool with mail-in and absentee ballots, and mail-ins are the same. I'm cool with them in Florida. Why? Because he's got the friendly contract. It is literally like a cartel, fam, where they split up territory, especially here in Florida, right? They split up the territory, and they say, you could cheat here, we could cheat here, we could cheat within the parameters. As long as we don't let a third party come in, whoever cheats the best wins." Right. And that is typically the mentality. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, you got to hear some of the outlandish attacks. So the Democrats really went deep in this one. And here, just play the first one, Johnny, when it says, so during the hearing, we heard some outlandish attacks. Look at the way they're trying to compare this to and stuff. So here we go. The first orange. It's a short video. Guys, get over to Rockfin.
Do your mail delays fit Trump's campaign goal of hurting the post office, as stated in his tweets? Are your mail delays implicit campaign contributions?
These types of questions. I'm here to represent the Postal Service. It has nothing to do with, all my actions have to do with improvement into the Postal Service. Am I the only one in this room that understands that we have a $10 billion a year loss? Right? Am I the only one in this room that has looked at the OIG reports that have stacked up?
Will you give this committee your communications with Mark Meadows, with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin,
Go
with
ahead
the
and
President. Mr. DeJoy, is your backup plan to be pardoned like Roger Stone?
Oh, God. Pitiful.
You have 2 seconds to answer the question.
I have no comment on that.
All right. I mean, see, fam, that's the kind of crap that really just puts the Democrats over the top. Like, is your plan to be pardoned by Roger Stone? Like, no, this is like a situation in the Bill situation where they didn't give the Democrats what they wanted. And, you know, Nancy Pelosi, she took a good swipe at it. She tried to get something amended that would help the Democrats. It didn't work out. So now they're pivoting to a guy who's been in mid-July. And don't get me wrong. I know when the Democrats go, oh, he has interest. He has another company, a logistics company that is in competition with the post office and all these other things. But when the president gets elected, the winning president gets elected, whether we like it or not, he's going to get to appoint his people, just like when the Democrats do it too. And we don't like the pay-for-play scandal that the Clintons got caught on it. If you don't want them, picking the guy that you don't like, then win the election and pick the guy you like. But the Democrats have also never really funded a major bill to help and pull the post office out of the depths the way it's in, you know, because there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of loss. So, I mean, this kind of attacks and mentality, to me, it gets stupid sometimes what the Democrats try to do. Not to say that I don't want to save the post office or I want the post office to strive. Man, it hires more veterans than any freaking federal job you can get. But, I mean, this is once again, here they are throwing the Hail Mary pass, trying to, you're going to get pardoned like Roger Stone?
Right, yeah. The Democrats are using the post office, like I said before, to like manipulate this whole situation politically and say Trump is going to cheat and Russia. They already involved Russia and all of these things. But the reality is like neither party is actually for election integrity. Like, let's get that straight out. Neither party right now is fighting for that. If they were, we would have it already. We would have, if Trump really wanted to really be honest about that, and if the Democrats wanted to be honest about that, we would have open source. We would say, you know what, we're gonna have public counting of all the votes in every state. We're gonna have more oversight. We're gonna change the way we do things. Like, yes, it's great to verify a signature. People should do that, but it has to be done in a way that isn't in control by one person or one private corporation. And so that's what I just don't see any. I see both parties taking advantage of it for political reasons. I'm not going to give credit to either one because I see that it's just them both seeing who's going to cheat better and trying to accuse the other of cheating. And we know both of them cheat. It's that simple. They both cheat. They both rig elections. Somebody in the chat said, no, Republicans are the only ones that have been caught. No, that is not the case. Democrats have cheated the last two elections in the primaries against Bernie Sanders. They have cheated in congressional races. The last 3 sets of congressional races that I know of, but both of them have been cheating for a very long time. It started with it really got popular with the George Bush versus Al Gore when the Republican were doing it with the hanging chads in Florida and all of that. But like I said, like this happens on both ends of the spectrum. And if anybody were serious about it, they would be with us out there wanting open source machines, wanting, at least discussing ranked choice voting, discussing other forms, putting legislation out. They're not doing that. So that's the reality.
Absolutely, fam. Absolutely all those things you talk about. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I also want to talk about, here's when the Democrats, for people who are paying even more attention, can see. The Democrats, they're not like me, fam. I'm a vegan. I don't eat pork. The Democrats, all they do is fill pork in everything they can. They filled it in this last bill right now that they knew wasn't going to get through. But you can see right here, Johnny, this next one is Zero Hedge article right below Van Drew, what they tried to do. Fam, I think it was you who pointed out to me last year that the Democrats take a lot of money from law firms, right? There's a lot of lawyers. Obama was a lawyer. There's law firms all over the place. They get money from law firms left and right. So here's in this article, which is Republican, who once was a Democrat, he switched over Van Drew. This is what he says. And he says, as the conversation turned to the Democrats' $25 billion aid package for USPS, Van Drew pointed out an interesting provision of the USPS law that hasn't been widely reported. One part of the law, he explained, makes it easier for people to sue the post office. This could lead to a lot more liability issues and a lot more costs. They suddenly put in there that you can now sue the post office, Van Drew said on Fox and Friends this weekend. We're going to have a lot more liability issues, a lot more costs, certainly more money, I guess, for attorneys, but a whole lot less money for taxpayers. Who told them to do that? Who wants that? Why are they doing that? I don't understand what we're actually doing sometimes rather than getting good work accomplished for the people of the United States of America. It's just folks arguing with each other and the Democrats not wanting to cooperate ever. Well, I'm not going to completely agree with him because they got their own fugaziness. But once again, they're going to slip in more money, and they said it's going to be easier to sue the post office. So now lawyers are going to get money from the federal government to defend the post office, and there's going to be a lot more work for lawyers to defend the post office on your taxpayer dollar.
Yeah. I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah, it is. They both suck, Johnny. They're one big party. Now, listen, here's one. I want to point out Ro Khanna's position right here. Ro Khanna's got a little video up here. It's a couple minutes. And it's really good. And, you know, I'm not always – I can be rough on Ro at times. But during this whole process of watching this hearing, which I think I have teeth left in my back, I pulled a couple out. It was that nauseating because I just see a ton of taxpayer dollars just getting lit up on fire and going in there arguing for no reason. I mean, I don't know why Nancy Pelosi didn't pull everybody back to get a rent control or a rent freeze. But, you know, I mean, she's going to do this knowing that this is going nowhere. It's going nowhere, and she knows it. But here's Ro Khanna, who said a couple things. DeJoy got a little testy with him because DeJoy was getting beat up. But, you know, I think DeJoy could take it. Looking at him, he was kind of handling it and firing back. But check out Ro Khanna real quick.
Appreciated one point you made, which is you assume that those who disagree with you have a legitimate difference, a legitimate perspective. Your perspective is that these mail sorting machines aren't required because packages need to be delivered and open up floor space. It's your testimony that you didn't direct it, correct? Who directed it?
I have not done an investigation. It came probably through our operation. It's been a long-term initiative.
You don't know who directed it? You don't know who implemented it?
Well, there's hundreds of them around the country in different places. It was an initiative within the organization that preceded
Okay,
me.
so your perspective is this is necessary to make efficiency of packages. You understand that there are millions of people in America who have the opposite view, who are concerned that this may slow down the delivery of mail. Do you have any sense of how much it would cost to restore these machines?
No,
Would it be more than $10 billion?
More than what?
$10 billion?
$10 billion?
Yeah, no, right?
No.
More than $1 billion?
It'd be less than $10 billion.
Less than $1 billion?
I would assume so.
Okay,
It's
so
only
here's my
700
question.
machines.
Let's stipulate that you may be right about the efficiency. I disagree with you, but let's just stipulate that. Now, we have Donald Trump, the president, tweeting out yesterday that he's up in the polls. He thinks he's going to win. Nate Silver thinks Biden is going to win. I think everyone in this room can agree on one thing. Whoever wins, the American people should have confidence in that result. So if it cost less than $1 billion, regardless of whether it's efficient or not, what is the harm in just putting those machines back until Election Day just for the peace of mind, for the confidence of the American people?
Well, first of all, sir, we do not, we've heard all the statistics about the mail and the votes and so forth, right? And we don't need the machines to process the election. But you make a statement about for $1 billion, if we just gave you $1 billion, you're not going to give us $1 billion. So you're going to make a request. You have no way of getting us $1 billion. We haven't been funded in 10 years. You can't pass any legislation. Can't pass any legislation that helps the postal
If I could just finish this point. If we give you the money, do you see my point?
It's a hypothetical. I'm not willing to.
But I guess
you haven't given us any money.
What
you
is
haven't
the
given
harm?
us any legislation.
But what is the
harm? And
harm?
you're sitting here accusing me of things with regard to this machine as a committee.
I haven't accused you of anything.
And it's a big statement.
I'm trying to understand.
I
think I'm trying to understand what most Americans are trying to understand. What is the harm in putting these machines, even if the machines, in your perspective, don't do anything, what is the harm to do it till Election Day?
In Washington, it makes plenty sense. To me, it makes none.
You haven't explained why. And then final question
because they're not needed. That's why.
But if it will restore people's faith in a democracy and avoid a polarized electorate, I would think...
Get me the billion, and I'll put the machines in.
Okay, well, that's a commitment. We'll find a way to
All
get
right,
you the money.
Johnny.
The last question I have for you is,
So they, once again, you know, I like Rose's point of view. If it makes the public easy, when you put them back in, and DeJoy said, "Give me the $1 billion and I'll put them back in." You know what I'm saying? But the point of the matter is, fam, is that I'm so sorry, and I'm not a mail expert, but I don't think the sorting out and getting rid of these machines is going to slow anything down when it comes to the election whatsoever. I really do not. I am not an expert, like I said. But I think it's just another red herring. I like what Ro kind of had to say, but you can see the frustration when it comes to DeJoy and people when it comes to the Postal Department. Congress has not been able to act to get them the appropriate tools, and that's why we are here today.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? This is not something that just happened overnight that Donald Trump's going to. This shit has been going on for a long, long time, and I think in Donald Trump's ego, he wants to save the post office his way so he can be the champion. Whereas I think a lot of Republicans in the past would just rather do away with it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Johnny, got anything to say about that one? Before you hear DeJoy's closing arguments.
No, let's just listen to his argument.
Yeah.
As part of this conversation, there are many inaccuracies about my actions that I wish to again correct. First, I did not direct the removal of blue collection boxes or the removal of mail processing equipment. Second, I did not direct the cutback on hours at any of our post offices. And finally, I did not direct the elimination or any cutback in overtime. I did, however, suspend these practices to remove any misperceptions about our commitment to delivering the nation's election mail. Any further assertions by the media or elected officials is furthering a false narrative to the American people. As part of this conversation, there are many inaccuracies.
All right, I'm so sorry I lost the sound there for a second. But once again, like he said, he didn't enact these policies. These were in play before he got there. He was seeing them through. All the Democrats, calling for his head, go resign. This guy's got to resign. They're trying to make it look like they caught somebody with their hand in the cookie jar. He said, you know what? No, I didn't do any of that stuff. And in fact, I'll suspend it until after your election. So what more can the Democrats really complain about, fam, at this point? I don't know.
I mean, I'm just like, I just think this is all a waste of time. People are like, people still don't know if they're going to get their money. People are still like on the verge of eviction. And I feel like this is just a really big pissing contest between the Democrats and the Republicans. And I'm just so over it. Like, I think the post office is important, but I also think there's manipulation by the Democrats on it. And Donald Trump is also trying to manipulate everything regarding this election. And our elections haven't been fair for a really long time. So there are a lot of hypocrites out there who all of a sudden want to say, oh, look, they're cheating. But they didn't give two shits about how Bernie Sanders got the election stolen from him and how we have been screaming about election integrity and how we need to fix the entire system this whole time, and how even Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the last race. I mean, all of these things have been happening, and especially in places like Florida, and nobody cares. But if there's a political maneuver that they can get out of it, then that's when they start talking about it. But it never solves the actual issue. And the post office has been suffering for a very long time. Like we said, this isn't anything new. So,
and they do a hell of a job too. I think the post office does a great job. I mean, I'll go in there sometimes. I'll get a little frustrated. I'm waiting in line. I'm like, why don't they have two people here? You get that lady who's going to pay for one stamp, and she's going to take out 23 coins to pay 23 stamps, and takes forever. And you're like, oh my God, you get frustrated. But at the end of the day, packages get where they got to go, and they get there in a pretty good time. So I would like to embrace the post office in every way, shape, or form. People like Carlito, our friends and stuff like that. But I just want to say that this problem that's going on is not specific to Donald Trump. Republicans have been going after the post office for a long time. Yeah. And even Obama's guy that he appointed several years ago, a lot of progressives complained about him. You know what I'm saying? And the fact they're calling for DeJoy's head when DeJoy showed, hey, I didn't implement this shit. It was implemented before me. I'm seeing it through, but yet guess what? I'll freeze it then. If it makes you feel better, I'll freeze it. You know what I'm saying? And both parties cheat, fam, like you said. And this particular situation, when it comes to the Democrats, comes down to Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump playing the Democrats like a fool with that executive order. You know what I'm saying? If the Democrats, though, really did care about fair elections, they would move the conversation to the real issue. And I wrote it down, and Johnny, I put it nice and slanted so you can put it up if you like. And it says, our elections are run and controlled by zombie corporations that lack electoral transparency in all phases of voting and tabulation while using the cloaking device of proprietary software and ownership. Both the Democrats and Republicans excessively cheat voters for their own personal gain and divide up the territory as if they were a cartel. The main goal is not only to maintain power, but to suppress progressive change and stifle any possibility of a third party getting national recognition and funding. If we really wanted to have fair elections, fam, we would do what you said. Open source, let's throw out the corporations. There are so many things, and the reason why I didn't type this up, because this is where we get into a little bit of bumping when it comes to the activists in the electoral world. We have to come up with solutions, and both parties are kind of fighting on what needs to be done, both sides, the open source versus the hand counters. I want both.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I want both. Yeah. No, I just want to say I agree with you. I want both. I think we need a paper trail for everything, but we also, we're not going to be able to escape technology. So I think like it, I tend to favor literal, just like paper ballots. But we're not going to be able to escape technology for that long. People want to be able to vote more easily. So we are going to have to embrace technology. But if we do embrace technology, we need to have multiple layers of oversight and open source and public viewing of the counting of such ballots and checking in on the software and the system, etc. All these things have to be extremely transparent, which they're not right now, that as we know. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think that a lot of the election integrity activists agree on is that the counting of the ballots should be done inside that precinct that they're voted on. And that's very important, because once we get them out of there, anything can happen. The chain of custody, we use that term a lot. It's very important. Once you break the chain of custody, you have no integrity when it comes to your election. So me personally, I want the votes as soon as the ballot marking device, or if you mark it by hand, comes out, and that goes into a ballot box. I want them going into an open source machine where humans can't look at them to change them, whatnot. And then a 100% tabulation by people in public where we can see it. So, I mean, that's what I want personally. But then we also the mail-in problem, fam. We talked about this. Johnny and I had on, when you were gone, we had on Dr. Rebecca Mercury. And she talked about the security of these mail-in ballots. I mean, monopoly money is more secure and verifiable than these ballots. Anybody can print these ballots out. There's not a good tracking system, which it looks like for this particular election, they're trying to push in California for more tracking methods. But what's to stop anybody who wants to cheat, especially when the mail-in ballot company has everything? Printing, storing, mailing, receiving, data processing, all that needs to be pulled away from them. And what the frig our election departments are doing? If we want to get the ballots printed out by somebody, that's fine, but they should be mailed out from the registrars or go back to the registrars, and everything has to be made public with cameras. So when they come in, we see it, it's counted, and everything doesn't leave our eye at all times. And these ballots need to be serious. I mean, the way somebody can win a lottery and they can say, oh, it would happen in this place at this time, because they can track all that stuff. Our mail-in ballots need to have the same type of mechanism where we know what's what.
100%. Agree with you, Pam.